What did Buddha refuse to answer? The reason why is here. The endless search for answers. It's 3 a.m. A young woman, eyes strained and weary, scrolls through an endless stream of content, Reddit threads, YouTube videos, philosophy forums. She's chasing something elusive, another theory, another explanation, another possibility, but with every answer she finds, a dozen new questions emerge. This isn't just a modern problem. Over 2.500 years ago, some of the greatest minds in ancient India stood before one of history's most enlightened beings. Gautama Buddha, hoping for the ultimate truth. They had 14 burning questions about the nature of the universe, the mind, the soul, and suffering, but instead of responding, Buddha remained silent. Why? Was he avoiding the questions? Or did his silence hold a deeper meaning? In this exploration, we will uncover the wisdom behind his silence, how it relates to modern science and philosophy, and why our obsession with certain answers can sometimes do more harm than good. Chapter 1. The Cosmic Questions, the Universe and its Mysteries. 1. Is the universe eternal? Scientists at CERN are colliding particles at nearly the speed of light, spending billions to uncover the origins of our universe. Telescopes gaze billions of light years away, searching for the edge of reality. And yet, thousands of years ago, people were already asking Buddha, is the universe eternal? Did it have a beginning, or has it always existed? Buddha refused to answer. Why? Because whether the universe is infinite or finite, it doesn't change how you live your life today. Knowing if the universe had a starting point doesn't remove your suffering. Instead of answering, he redirected seekers toward what actually matters: how to live meaningfully in the present moment. Modern cosmology attempts to answer these grand questions with theories such as the Big Bang, which posits that the universe had a beginning approximately 13.8 billion years ago. Some scientists, however, propose alternative models, such as the cyclical universe theory, where the cosmos undergoes infinite cycles of expansion and contraction. Others hypothesize that our universe could be one of many in a vast multiverse, possibly without a single beginning or end. But even if physicists one day uncover the ultimate answer, what would change? Would it resolve human suffering, mend broken hearts, or ease the burden of existential dread? The Buddha's wisdom remains ever relevant. Speculating about cosmic origins is intellectually stimulating, but it does not lead to enlightenment. Instead, he taught that direct experience and self-awareness bring true wisdom. The universe's eternity or transience is a question of scale. In the grand expanse of cosmic time, civilizations rise and fall, stars are born and die, and galaxies collide in slow celestial dances. But what about the time we spend trapped in our own minds? Are we aware of our fleeting existence? Or are we too preoccupied with distractions to notice the present moment slipping away? Buddha's teaching reminds us that time itself is an illusion. What matters is how we use it. 2. Does the universe have an end? Astrophysicists propose multiple theories regarding the universe's fate. The Big Freeze. The universe expands indefinitely. Stars burn out, and everything fades into a cold, dark void. The Big Crunch. The expansion reverses, pulling galaxies back together into an eventual cosmic collapse. The Heat Death. A state of maximum entropy where no useful energy remains for sustaining motion or life. Each of these scenarios provides a theoretical endpoint, yet none offer solace to a grieving heart or an anxious mind. Whether the cosmos collapses or expands forever, how does that knowledge help us navigate personal struggles, heartbreak, fear, loss? Buddha understood that cosmic knowledge was fascinating but ultimately irrelevant to human liberation. Instead of seeking answers about the fate of the universe, he focused on practical wisdom that brings peace here and now. He taught that everything, our bodies, our emotions, our very thoughts, is impermanent. The nature of existence is transitory, and clinging to what is temporary only leads to suffering. What does it mean if the universe ends? To those suffering from daily stress and sorrow, it means nothing. If the entire cosmos is impermanent, then our struggles, our worries, and our attachments are even more so. Understanding impermanence at a cosmic scale helps us realize how insignificant our worries are in the grand scheme of things. And yet, paradoxically, it also teaches us the significance of every fleeting moment. Zen Buddhism, a later development from Buddha's original teachings, often employs the metaphor of a dewdrop reflecting the morning sun. It is beautiful, radiant, yet ephemeral. It vanishes with the heat of the day. Our lives, like the dewdrop, shine briefly before dissolving back into the vast cycle of existence. We do not control when the universe will end, but we do have control over how we experience each passing moment. So why did Buddha refuse to answer questions about the universe's end? Because pondering these matters does not lead to inner peace. The only real question is, how do you choose to live today? When you wake up tomorrow, will you be burdened by the weight of an uncertain future? Or will you embrace each moment with awareness, gratitude, and compassion? Will you be lost in endless speculation? Or will you see life as it is, vibrant and impermanent? The cosmic mysteries remain unanswered, but Buddha left us a clear path. Awaken to the present. Cultivate wisdom, and free yourself from suffering. The universe may have an end, but enlightenment is timeless. Chapter 2. The questions about consciousness. 1. Are the mind and body separate? Modern neuroscience still grapples with the fundamental question: is consciousness merely a byproduct of neural activity? Or does it exist beyond the confines of the physical brain? This question is not only scientific but also deeply philosophical and spiritual. While dualists argue that the mind and body are distinct entities, materialists believe that consciousness arises solely from the interactions of neurons and synapses. The Buddha, however, did not directly engage in such theoretical debates. His approach was radically different. Rather than speculating on whether mind and body are separate, he invited his followers to explore the nature of experience itself. He emphasized direct observation, urging practitioners to investigate their own mental processes through mindfulness and meditation. Don't ask what the mind is. Observe it, experience it. This teaching reflects the core of Buddhist insight. True understanding comes not from abstract reasoning but from direct experience. Through deep meditation, practitioners begin to perceive that what we call mind is not a fixed entity but a dynamic process, an ongoing stream of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. The body, too, is not a static structure but a changing composition of elements. The belief in a rigid separation between mind and body dissolves as one experiences their interdependent nature. The practice of vipassana meditation, for example, reveals how bodily sensations and mental states are inextricably linked. A feeling of fear manifests in the body as tension. A moment of peace produces relaxation. In Buddhist psychology, this relationship is encapsulated in the concept of nama-rupa, the interplay between mind, nama, and form, rupa. Instead of answering the question of separation, the Buddha pointed toward a deeper realization: the self we cling to is an illusion. Neither the body nor the mind exists as an independent, unchanging entity. What we consider I is a constantly shifting process, subject to impermanence, anicca, unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and the absence of a fixed self, anatta. In contrast, modern science is slowly arriving at similar conclusions. Neuroscientific studies suggest that consciousness is an emergent property of complex brain functions. But the precise nature of this emergence remains elusive. Some quantum physicists and cognitive scientists even propose that consciousness might be fundamental to the universe itself. Yet, despite these explorations, direct experiential wisdom remains the most profound means of understanding. The Buddha's silence on this matter was not an omission but an invitation, a challenge to shift from intellectual speculation to direct perception. When we cease to argue about the nature of mind and body and instead turn inward, we discover the profound truth of our own experience. 2. What happens to consciousness after death? Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has pondered the fate of consciousness beyond death. Various traditions propose different views. Some believe in an eternal soul that transcends the body. Others assert that consciousness simply ceases, and many spiritual paths describe reincarnation or rebirth. Buddhism, however, approaches this question uniquely. The Buddha did not offer a definitive answer to whether consciousness survives death in a way that satisfies intellectual curiosity. Instead, he redirected the focus to something far more immediate. Are you truly alive right now? The essence of his teaching lies in this inquiry. If one spends their life anxiously debating the afterlife, they miss the opportunity to awaken in the present moment. Death is inevitable, but before we concern ourselves with what comes next, we must ask, are we fully present in our own existence now? This is not to say that Buddhism ignores the continuity of consciousness. The doctrine of dependent origination, paticca samuppada, suggests that consciousness is part of an intricate web of causes and effects. Just as one moment of awareness gives rise to the next, the momentum of our actions, karma, conditions future experiences. The concept of rebirth in Buddhism is not the transmigration of a fixed soul but the continuation of a stream of consciousness influenced by past actions. The analogy often used is that of a flame lighting another flame, continuity without permanence. Near-death experiences, mystical visions, and stories of past life recollections may intrigue us, but the Buddha warned against becoming attached to such narratives. Whether one believes in an afterlife or not, the critical question remains, how are we living right now? Are we cultivating awareness, compassion, and wisdom in this very moment? Through meditation and deep introspection, practitioners begin to see that what we call self is a transient construct. The clinging to identity, possessions, and future expectations only deepens suffering. When we let go of attachment to a fixed self, the fear of death begins to dissolve. Instead of fixating on what happens after death, Buddhism teaches us to die to each moment, to release, surrender, and embrace the flow of impermanence. In the end, the question of whether consciousness persists beyond the body is less important than how we engage with life itself. If we cultivate awareness, if we awaken to the present, if we live with compassion and wisdom, then regardless of what happens after death, we have already touched the essence of enlightenment. Chapter 3. The questions about existence and identity. Does an enlightened being exist after death? The seekers wanted certainty. Does an enlightened soul persist after death? Or do they cease to exist? Or is it both, or neither? Buddha's response? Silence. This was not avoidance but a dismantling of the very framework of the question. The inquiry itself is rooted in dualistic thinking, existence versus non-existence, while reality, as understood in the awakened state, transcends such binaries. The Buddha's approach was to move beyond speculative philosophy into the realm of direct experience. Imagine asking, where does the flame go when the candle is blown out? The question itself is flawed. Existence and non-existence are human concepts, but reality is beyond them. The enlightened being does not cling to a fixed identity. So when the physical form dissolves, there is no fixed entity that either continues or ceases. Instead, what remains is the unconditioned, free from the cycles of birth and death. Beyond description, beyond the mind's grasp. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha likened nirvana to the extinguishing of a fire, not in the sense of annihilation, but in the sense of release. The fire, when it goes out, is not destroyed, it merely ceases to burn due to the absence of fuel. Similarly, an enlightened being is free from the conditions that sustain the cycle of samsara. There is no self left to grasp onto either existence or non-existence. The Avyukata, unanswered, questions whether an enlightened being exists after death. Does not exist. Both, or neither, were intentionally left unanswered by the Buddha. He pointed out that clinging to such questions only leads to suffering. Instead, he directed his followers toward liberation through direct experience, rather than entangling themselves in endless conceptual debates. In modern terms, this teaching aligns with the idea that reality is not constrained by the human mind's categorical distinctions. Quantum physics, for instance, suggests that particles exist in a state of probability rather than fixed existence or non-existence until observed. Similarly, the Buddha urged seekers to move beyond rigid conceptualizations of identity, being, and time. Thus, rather than seeking certainty about what happens after death, the real question is, are we seeking truth in the present moment? Are we awakening to the nature of impermanence and non-self here and now? The Buddha's silence was not ignorance, it was the ultimate teaching, pointing directly to an experience that words can never fully encapsulate. Chapter 4. The fundamental question of suffering. Is suffering self-caused or external? We love to assign blame. When life falls apart, we ask, is it my fault? Is it someone else's fault? Is it fate, karma, the universe? This need to find a clear culprit is a natural psychological response. It gives us a sense of control. If suffering has a single source, then perhaps it has a single solution. However, the reality is much more complex. The Buddha did not provide a simple answer because suffering is not simple. Modern research supports this. Suffering arises from an intricate web of personal choices, genetics, and external circumstances. Searching for a single cause often prevents us from addressing suffering effectively. The layers of suffering. Suffering operates on multiple levels, making it difficult to pin down a sole origin. 1. Personal responsibility. Some suffering is undeniably the result of our own choices. Habits of mind, attachments, and unchecked desires lead to pain. The Buddha taught that craving, tanha, is one of the root causes of suffering. When we resist reality, insist on permanence in a world of impermanence, or chase after fleeting pleasures, we create suffering for ourselves. 2. External forces. Not all suffering is self-inflicted. Natural disasters, economic downturns, political oppression, or personal betrayals can impose suffering upon us without our consent. To ignore external influences would be to dismiss the real struggles that people endure due to war, disease, or social injustices. 3. Karma and interconnectedness. The law of karma suggests that our past actions influence our present reality. However, karma is not always direct and immediate. It unfolds through conditions and interdependencies. Sometimes, suffering arises from collective karma, generations of choices, societal structures, and historical events that shape the lives of individuals today. 4. The mind's role. Neuroscience shows that the brain interprets suffering in ways that are often disproportionate to reality. Our reactions, interpretations, and narratives about suffering can magnify or diminish its impact. A single rejection can feel like a catastrophe if we allow our minds to replay it endlessly. The Buddha's radical shift. Rather than focusing on blame, Buddha redirected the question entirely. Rather than asking why you suffer, ask how to transform suffering into wisdom. This shift in perspective moves suffering from something to be feared or avoided into something that can be understood, transformed, and even transcended. The real power lies not in eliminating suffering, but in altering our relationship with it. How to transform suffering. 1. Acceptance and awareness. Many people react to suffering with denial or avoidance. However, suffering is an inevitable part of existence. By mindfully acknowledging pain rather than resisting it, we create the space to work with it rather than be consumed by it. 2. Letting go of the ego's story. The ego clings to identity, stories, and victimhood. It constantly asks, "Why me?" But suffering is universal. When we detach from our personal narrative and recognize that suffering is not a punishment but a condition of existence, we free ourselves from unnecessary mental anguish. 3. Compassion as an antidote. The Dalai Lama teaches that compassion, both for oneself and others, lessens suffering. When we shift from self-pity to service, from despair to empathy, suffering transforms into connection. It is no longer a weight that isolates us but a bridge that links us to the shared human experience. 4. Seeing impermanence clearly. Suffering often arises because we resist change, but everything is impermanent: pain, pleasure, loss, joy. Understanding this truth deeply helps us endure suffering with greater equanimity, knowing that nothing remains fixed. 5. Mindfulness and meditation. Meditation does not eliminate suffering but changes how we experience it. When we observe pain without reacting, its hold on us weakens. This practice rewires the brain, making it more resilient to distress. 6. Gratitude in the midst of pain. Even in suffering, there are aspects of life to be grateful for. Gratitude shifts focus from what is lacking to what remains, offering a new way to engage with hardship. The path beyond suffering. Buddha's teachings do not deny suffering but teach us how to rise above it, not by eradicating it but by transforming it. The real question is not whether suffering is self-caused or externally imposed, but how we respond to it. When we stop looking for someone to blame and instead seek the wisdom within suffering, we step onto the path of true liberation. Chapter 5. The Poisoned Arrow Parable. The Buddha tells a story of a man struck by a poisoned arrow. Before allowing a doctor to remove it, the man insists on knowing. Who shot the arrow? What type of bow did they use? Where did the arrow come from? But while he waits for these answers, the poison spreads, and he dies. The lesson beyond the parable. This story is more than just a metaphor. It is a reflection of how human beings often respond to suffering. Instead of seeking relief and healing, we become entangled in questions, theories, and unnecessary speculations. The Buddha's message is clear. Your suffering is the arrow. Do you want answers, or do you want healing? How we keep the poisoned arrow within ourselves. In modern life, we often behave like the man in the story. When faced with pain, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, we focus on external justifications rather than addressing the suffering itself. 1. Blaming instead of healing. Many people spend years asking why something bad happened to them. Oh, why did my relationship fail? Oh, why did I lose my job? Oh, why is life unfair? These questions may seem important, but dwelling on them without taking action is like refusing to remove the arrow. The deeper we hold onto resentment, the longer suffering controls us. 2. Intellectualizing instead of experiencing. Some engage in endless philosophical or religious debates about suffering. Oh, is there a higher purpose for pain? Oh, do we suffer because of karma, fate, or divine punishment? Oh, is suffering real, or just an illusion? While these discussions can be interesting, they often distract from the immediate reality. Suffering is present, and it must be addressed. No amount of theoretical understanding can remove the arrow lodged in our hearts. 3. Delaying the cure. Just as the man refused immediate treatment, many people delay their healing by seeking closure, apologies, or explanations before they allow themselves to move forward. They believe that until they fully understand their suffering, they cannot let it go. But healing does not come from explanations, it comes from transformation. The path to removing the arrow. So, how do we remove the poisoned arrow of suffering? 1. Recognizing suffering as it is. The first step is acknowledging that suffering exists without resisting or denying it. Pain is not a punishment, nor does it always have a grand cosmic meaning. It is simply a part of life. When we stop resisting suffering, we stop amplifying it. 2. Focusing on what can be done. Instead of demanding answers, ask, "Oh, what can I do right now to alleviate this pain? Oh, what practices, mindsets, or actions will help me heal? Oh, how can I transform suffering into wisdom?" These questions shift our focus from victimhood to empowerment. 3. Practicing mindfulness and letting go. Mindfulness teaches us to observe suffering without attachment. Instead of feeding our pain with endless thoughts and emotions, we simply acknowledge it and let it pass, like clouds moving across the sky. 4. Finding liberation through compassion. The final step is to cultivate compassion for ourselves and others. When we realize that suffering is universal, we become less consumed by our own pain. Service, kindness, and connection become powerful tools for healing. The ultimate message. The Buddha's parable is not just about suffering, it is about liberation. The moment we stop demanding unnecessary answers and start focusing on healing, we begin to free ourselves. The real question is not why we suffer, but how we choose to respond. Do you still want answers, or do you want to heal? Chapter 6. Living with Uncertainty. Modern society is addicted to answers. We Google everything, seek instant explanations, and believe that knowledge alone can ease our fears. We are conditioned to think that certainty equals security, that if we just knew what was coming, we could prepare, control, and protect ourselves from suffering. Yet, the Buddha's silence on certain metaphysical questions teaches a radical truth. Not all questions need answers. Not all mysteries need solving. Freedom is not in certainty but in learning to embrace uncertainty. The illusion of control. We chase certainty because we believe it grants us control. We want to know. Will I succeed in my career? Will this relationship last? What happens after death? But the truth is, certainty is an illusion. No amount of planning, predicting, or analyzing can guarantee a specific outcome. The more we cling to control, the more suffering we create for ourselves when life unfolds differently than expected. Buddhism teaches that everything is impermanent, anicca, the self, the world, even the very moment we are experiencing. It is all in a constant state of flux. The sooner we accept this, the less we suffer. Why do we fear uncertainty? The human mind craves predictability because it equates the unknown with danger. In the past, uncertainty meant physical threats, predators, famine, or hostile environments. Our ancestors who feared the unknown were more likely to survive. Today, the threats are different but the fear remains. Instead of lions in the wild, we fear financial instability, rejection, illness, or existential uncertainty. We try to fill the void with information, distractions, and rigid belief systems, but none of these truly satisfy. The Buddha's radical perspective on uncertainty. One of the most profound moments in Buddhist history was when the Buddha refused to answer speculative metaphysical questions. When asked about the origins of the universe, the existence of a soul, or what happens after death, he remained silent. His silence was not ignorance, it was wisdom. Buddha knew that obsessing over the unknowable leads to distraction, anxiety, and suffering. He redirected attention to what truly mattered: how to live skillfully in the present, how to cultivate peace within uncertainty, and how to transform suffering into wisdom. Learning to live with the questions. Instead of fearing uncertainty, What if we embraced it? Studies show that people who accept uncertainty are happier. They do not waste energy resisting what they cannot change. More creative. Uncertainty allows for new perspectives and possibilities. More resilient. They adapt to life's changes rather than breaking under pressure. How to cultivate comfort in uncertainty. 1. Shift from control to curiosity. Instead of asking, "What if something goes wrong?" ask, "What can I learn from this experience?" A curious mind sees uncertainty as an adventure, not a threat. 2. Practice mindfulness. The present moment is the only certainty we ever have. By fully immersing in the now, we free ourselves from the anxieties of an unknown future. 3. Detach from the need for absolute truths. Many people suffer because they seek a definitive answer to every philosophical or spiritual question. True wisdom lies in knowing that some things cannot be known, and that is okay. 4. Trust the flow of life. The river does not know exactly where it will go, but it keeps moving. Life is the same. Trusting the process does not mean being passive. It means accepting what comes with an open heart. The freedom of letting go. When we stop demanding certainty, we experience a new kind of freedom. We no longer need all the answers. We no longer need to control every detail. We become lighter, more at peace, and more in tune with the natural rhythm of life. Uncertainty is not something to be solved, it is something to be lived. Conclusion. The silence that speaks. The 14 unanswered questions continue to haunt us today. Scientists, philosophers, and spiritual seekers still wrestle with them, searching for meaning in the unknown. We are drawn to certainty, believing that knowledge will bring clarity, control, and peace. But perhaps the Buddha's silence was not avoidance, it was the deepest answer of all. The weight of unanswered questions. The human mind resists the unknown. It demands. What happens after death? Is the universe eternal or finite? Does the self truly exist? We believe that if we could just answer these, we would be free from doubt and suffering. Yet, history shows that even when people find an answer that satisfies them, new questions arise. The cycle of seeking never truly ends. Why did the Buddha remain silent? When asked about the nature of the universe, the afterlife, or the absolute truth of existence, the Buddha did not engage in debate. He did not offer speculative theories. Instead, he remained silent. This silence was not ignorance. It was profound wisdom. The Buddha understood that certain questions, no matter how fascinating, do not lead to liberation. Instead of chasing intellectual certainty, he redirected attention to the present moment, to the nature of suffering, and to the path of peace. Living beyond the need for answers. The next time your mind spirals with unanswerable questions, pause, observe, ask yourself, will knowing this change how I live today? Because true wisdom is not about finding all the answers, it is about learning to live with the questions. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, they are meant to be experienced, accepted, and released. In that acceptance, we find true peace.